If you've spent any time on LinkedIn over the last month, you may have seen what seems to be a constant stream of executives leaving federal service. Whether they're retiring or they took the deferred resignation program or it's just through normal attrition, the exodus of federal executives feels more acute than ever before. In the Federal Report this week, Federal News Network's executive editor Jason Miller takes a deep dive into the data and offers federal executives who recently left some advice to find success in the private sector. Jason's joining me now to discuss this. Jason, great to have you.
Thank you, Terry.
Now we're in the beginning of calendar year 2026. 2025 is over. What does the data tell us about federal executives who are leaving executive agencies?
Let me start with the senior executive service, because that's interesting because it dropped. The number of people in the SES dropped by about 551 people in 2025. Now, Terry, this is the data coming from the Office of Personnel Management. They put out a whole new, what they used to call FedScope. They updated it last week, and it's a great tool to use. I'd highly recommend folks looking for it. We'll have a link to it on federalnewsnetwork.com as well. So the number of SESers dropped by about 551. But if you look at the next level down, now we're talking about GS-14s and 15s. Now, these folks are in the pipeline to become SESers. They also saw a significant one-year reduction. I'll give you some numbers. GS-14s in 2024, there are about 143,000 of them, according to OPM. In 2025, at the end, there was about 135,200, so almost 8,000 fewer GS-14s. When you look at GS-15s, same drop, about 63,200 in 2024. That dropped to 58,200 in 2025. Again, about 5,000 fewer. Now, if you look at both of these, what's interesting is both reductions came after years and years of growth. For example, in 2019, there were about 117,600 people at the GS-14 level. That's an 8,000 drop between 24 and 25, brings that number back to really all the growth they've seen since 2023. So just to give you a sense, the numbers that they took years and years to grow and grow and grow, and 1 year they dropped it back by after multiple years of growth. Now GS-15s, it's less dramatic. They're racing growth, albeit smaller growth, since 2021. So I think what you're seeing is this pipeline of people are just got smaller, and that impacts the ability to grow these SESers. Now overall, the change, We've talked about this quite a bit, Terry, about 317,000 fewer federal employees in 2025 than in 2024. Interestingly enough, OPM also tells us the median age of the federal worker remains at 47 years old, and about 13.5% of all feds are still eligible to retire, with SBA and NASA having the largest percentage of employees, more than 25%, who are eligible to retire.
As federal agencies are looking at this data, Jason, how concerned should they be about the pipeline of talent coming all the way up and then into and through the management ranks?
I think there's a lot of concerns if these trends continue, right? We have 1 year of trend. We have 1 year of data during the Trump administration after multiple years of growth. So we can't start ringing alarm bells. We can't start saying the world's going to end, right? But 1 year decline, and there are significant declines in the GS-14 and 15 levels and SES levels, that really does impact how agencies are managed, because until Congress cuts mission, until Congress says, hey, no, you no longer have to do this thing, whatever this thing is, those mission areas still have to be picked up. And actually, that's where Michelle Sutter, the director of the Senior Executive Association's board, talked to me. Now, she spent about 15 years in government before leaving last year under the DRP. She says the 1 year reductions in SESers, as well as what they're seeing in GS-14 and 15s, is worrisome for several reasons.
In conversations with our members, a consistent theme that we hear is that we have executive level employees that are literally at times doing the jobs of 3 to 4 people. And that's unprecedented, because it tells us that regardless of whether you're at the operational level or the executive level, you've got people functioning in roles sometimes that are outside of their daily operations that they would normally do. And the effect of this is it puts stress on the leaders. It makes it difficult to focus on mission delivery. And if you're having a tough time focusing on mission delivery, it makes it difficult to provide services to the American people.
Now, Sutter says this situation, obviously the burnout piece impact agency success, but it's also trickling down into the GS-14, 15 levels as well, who those folks work more at the operational level than maybe the top tactical policy level. Now, while these GS-14s and 15s may now have more opportunities to step in into acting or temporary roles since there's fewer SCSers, that maybe would prepare them, Sutter says there's still, again, the same concerns: burnout, cuts to training, education opportunities, and the need to deal with constant change. Those are still big challenges for all of these employees. And Sutter says, listen, this means also the SES pipeline also has been narrowed.
We need to really focus on our career senior executives. And I think over the next year, success is really going to depend on stabilizing leadership teams, being disciplined about the use of different roles, whether they be acting or permanent, and really investing in executive development and recognizing that executive effectiveness is critical to mission delivery. And as we know, this is not about routine federal leadership as it was in the past. How agencies support career executives now will absolutely shape continuity, performance, and leadership capacity well beyond the transition.
Now, SEA's Sutter says SEA obviously was pleased to see OPM coming out with new training and education programs. She hopes that the changes that OPM is offering, agencies will have funding for that and give, obviously, employees the time to take advantage of these new courses.
Jason, we mentioned in the intro, just seeing all of these posts on LinkedIn as people are trying to make the transition from public service to the private sector. What advice are you hearing, some things that they should keep in mind as they start looking or continue to look for a new position?
The market definitely is tighter. I hear that all the time. You know, the once where you could find a job if you're coming out of government fairly easily, that's not necessarily the case anymore. And Terry, you've experienced this. You probably know tons of people who have left government for a new job in the private sector, lasted less than a year, lasted less than 6 months. That's not an unusual sight. In fact, I talked to one of those people. I'll call this person Andy, not his real name. He left federal service earlier this year. I talked to one of them. His name is Andy, not his real name. He left federal service earlier this year after more than a decade. Andy worked in the private sector before coming into government, so that he had some experience there. But after less than a year in the private sector in his new job, he left that position too. Now, he tells me there was a little bit of mismatch with expectations, probably both on his part, but also on the company's part. He thought the role he would fill would make use of his background, his skills at a policy level. But the company was looking for someone at a more technical level who could help them at a more tactical level. So again, here's that mismatch, tactical versus, kind of operational. And he says too many times people in these companies don't really understand how to leverage government executives and government executive expertise, not just his company, but more broadly across the private sector. Now, one thing he did say was he gained the perspective that, many times private sector companies are looking to hire people with government experience, but they expect those people to grow their business by winning contracts. And Andy says if you're at the senior level government person coming in the private sector world, you need to be prepared to do a lot of educating of your new company about how you think you should be used. And he used a great example. He says if you're a screwdriver and the company wants to use you like a hammer, probably not the best fit. And I thought that's something we all can kind of put our mind around. Terry, real quick, I also talked to Tim Teal. He's the CEO and founder of the Bellwether Group. He's a former NSA and U.S. Cyber Command official. And he posted a lot of really solid advice on LinkedIn and then offered me some further insights by email. Like what we saw with Andy, Teal says a lot of the exits he's seen over the years are not really about competence. It's really about mismatched expectations. The executive thinks they're there to advise and shape strategy, and the company expects them to have an immediate impact. He says a lot of times people come in and say, I have all this authority. I have statutes, I know my roles. I know the mission. The industry says, no, we want you to come in and help us with our revenue, margin, and growth. And then finally, another thing that Tim Teal talked about was reputation in the government means a lot. In the private sector, reputation is all about performance. So yes, it can open the door for you, but you have to perform. And if you don't perform, your reputation doesn't matter.
These are such important lessons. Jason, did you get any input into the most common mistakes federal executives make when they get into a new position?
There's several that pop out. I'm sure, Terry, you probably have your own list that you could give help us out with. But going back to Tim Teal, he talks about successful government leaders don't cling to their status. They learn the business, they tie their value to outcomes, and they never confuse respect with immunity. Teal says the biggest mistake he sees is people negotiating the title before they understand their business. Now, if you don't know what the company does to make money and who they buy from, or where they're hurting, then you're kind of walking in blind. So obviously do your homework. And now that's an easy thing to say, but I think what Tim is talking about here is you really need to take a deep dive. And then another thing that Thiel says that new federal executives that going into the private sector should really understand is don't accept a role that has vague charters. If no one can clearly explain what success looks like in 6 months, that role will probably not last 6 months. Now, as for Andy, he's going out, he's going to do his own thing, test the waters. Maybe he'll go back to private sector. Maybe he'll go back to government one day. But he goes, this experience definitely has been eye-opening. And while he doesn't blame the company and he doesn't blame himself for things not working out, it's definitely an experience that he's better for. And I think, from his perspective, why he decided to talk to me was so others would not kind of have that same challenge. And the best piece of advice he gave me was when he was interviewing with this company, he had a little tickle in his gut that said, maybe this isn't right, but he ignored that tickle. So Terry, if you got a tickle in your gut, don't ignore it.
Jason, that is great advice. I've lived that out myself. Thanks for bringing us the story.
My pleasure.
That's Federal News Network's executive editor, Jason Miller, and you can find his story at federalnewsnetwork.com.